by and large, the emerging democracies the world over are multi-party systems. Incidentally, a multi-party system does not mean that there is a multitude of political parties. What it means is that the law allows many parties to be formed in the country, but also that no one party dominates to such an extent that all the other parties put together do not matter. In fact, such one-party dominance puts democratic consolidation at great risk. Because as a process of qualitative gains in the operations of various state institutions, democratic consolidation is subject, as Madam said, to lapses, setbacks, and even retrogression. It is also to be noted that elections constitute only one of the props in consolidating democracy. However, elections are of singular importance in a democracy because they constitute the only legitimate entrance to political leadership positions. Of course, this is not to belittle the validity and importance of appointive positions, which, by the way, are usually made by elected leaders. Madam Chair, against the backdrop of the foregoing clarification, I want to set off with a simplified definition of a democratic election in a multi-party system. The definition consists of three elements. One, it is a contest among parties and candidates to occupy positions of authority in the country. Two, the contest is mediated by an electoral commission. And three, the contest is decided by the votes of the electorate. Obviously, this is a simplified definition because there are other groups that play very important roles in a democratic election. For example, the government provides the money that the Electoral Commission needs, and an election is clearly in jeopardy if the money is not given in sufficient quantities or in a timely manner. The police are responsible not only for providing election security for candidates, election officials, and election materials, but also for securing a peaceful general environment so that voters feel safe to go to polling stations to vote on election day. And in many countries, civil society organizations play significant roles, particularly in voter education and election observation. Madam Chair, in spite of the important roles that other entities play in a democratic election, I think that in line with our discussion today, we can make do with our simplified definition and focus on the three main actors, namely the Electoral Commission, the political parties and candidates, and the electorate. By the way, if you were to ask me to rank the three groups of actors in an order of importance, my ranking would be the electorate first, political parties and candidates second, and the Electoral Commission third. This is not at all to belittle the importance of the Electoral Commission in the election enterprise. Indeed, arranging, managing, and conducting an election are very complex activities. But an Electoral Commission would be irrelevant if there were no candidates to contest an election. And there can be no election if there are no voters to decide the winner. Really, I do not want to be bogged down by attempting to define conflict. All I want to say is that conflict has its origins in disagreement. And for some reason or other, some of which reasons will hopefully be revealed in this discussion, election-related matters easily give rise to disagreement. Let me also say that on a continuum, an unresolved electoral conflict may fester and escalate from minima, that is not disruptive of existing arrangements, to maxima, that is disruptive of existing arrangements, and even war. So it is not in anybody's interest to allow any form of electoral conflict to persist. Madam Chair, electoral commissions in the emerging democracies of the world differ widely in their structures and compositions, the appointment and tenure of office of their members, recruitment of their personnel, their legal frameworks, their functions and powers, the financial arrangements under which they operate, and oversight of their work. The common thread that runs through the assortment of electoral commissions is the mandate to organize and conduct elections. Perhaps you are wondering why I did not say that the common mandate of all electoral commissions is to achieve free and fair elections. Let me say that not only do I believe in free and fair elections, but I also believe that a person who does not believe in free and fair elections does not believe in democracy. And the reason why an election in a country that claims to be a democracy should be free and fair is easy to find. The core idea which underpins democracy is that the people are sovereign and have the right to choose their leaders, to make and unmake a government. It is through an election that the people express their will in selecting their leaders. Madam Chair, used to describe an election, the terms free and fair do have substantive content, but they are loaded terms. Let us first take the term free and see what it contains. On the one hand, people must be free to do certain things, including to register as a voter, to join or not join a political party, to hold or attend party meetings and rallies, to campaign, and to cast a secret ballot. On the other hand, the entire electoral environment must be free from certain things, including intimidation, coercion, violence, bribery, cheating, corruption, and rigging. In respect of the term fair, two questions arise. What should be fair? And who should be fair? As to what should be fair, the election laws, regulations, processes, and procedures must apply equally to all relevant stakeholders, and where applicable, be simple enough for all to understand and participate. Additionally, there is a tall list of groups of people that must be fair in their actions, including the government, election officials, political parties, candidates, journalists, security personnel, the judiciary, and of course the electorate. With regard to the electorate, their basic role in a democratic election is that each voter is expected to cast one and only one vote at the election and to allow other voters freely to do the same. But it is important to bear in mind that the electorate are a motley group. It is to be expected that most of them will be members of different political parties. Madam Chair, let me say that because free and fair are loaded terms, some election observation groups shy away from using them to describe an election. Instead, they prefer the term credible. Describing an election as credible does not mean that it was entirely free or entirely fair. It only means that the election is acceptable as a basis for forming a legitimate government. In any case, I suppose that it can clearly be seen that achieving free and fair elections is not the responsibility of the Electoral Commission and its officials alone. It is a collective or shared responsibility of all the bodies and persons connected with elections. In fact, I have said on several occasions that an Electoral Commission may make the best preparations conceivable for an election to take place. But if the external environment is not right, conducting the election may be likened to washing a piece of white cloth in murky water and hoping that the cloth will not be stained. Madam Chair, let me now indicate some of the sources of electoral conflict. In spite of the variety of electoral commissions, the key activities that are usually undertaken in election administration are similar and include demarcating districts and constituencies, citing polling stations, registering voters, conducting elections, and collating and declaring results. Regardless of whether these activities are done by one or more bodies, they can, and indeed do, arouse disagreement, not only with political parties as such, but also members of parliament, chiefs, and local notables. Oftentimes, what catches the public eye is a dispute over election results. But usually the demarcation of districts and constituencies provokes more intractable disagreements than the conduct of elections. In addition to the fact that the very activities undertaken by electoral commissions are disposed to conflict, an electoral commission itself can also be a source of conflict if it is not perceived to be fair and transparent in doing its work. Madam Chair, similar to electoral commissions, the laws governing the formation and operation of political parties differ widely in the emerging democracies. But in spite of the differences, some of the key internal activities of political parties, such as the contest for leadership positions and the primaries to choose the party's parliamentary or presidential candidate, may arouse serious internal disagreements leading to violence. In fact, in the past, the internal feuds of some of the political parties in Kenya, for example, caused more violence than during the election campaign. Apart from the fact that the activities of the Electoral Commission and the political parties may easily arouse disagreement and conflict, there are other veritable sources of disagreement in the general environment. Without claiming to be exhaustive, I wish to call attention to some of these sources in a randomly arranged fashion. Madam Chair, let me start off with 3 examples from Ghana of what I refer to as plain lack of understanding of some aspect of the electoral process. And all the 3 relate to election day happenings. Example 1. On election day, a presiding officer, along with the other election officials and some party agents, decide to carry the election materials and walk to the polling station because it is getting to time stipulated for the election to start, but the police escort is nowhere to be found. On their way, they are set upon and violently attacked. I believe that any person who knows what a presiding officer is required to do at the polling station before voting starts will not do such a thing. In fact, to avoid distribution problems and delays in starting the poll, election materials are given to presiding officers 3 days ahead of election day in some countries, even in Africa. They give the materials to the presiding officers 3 days. In Ghana, if we give them to them to go and keep in a room overnight, they may not be alive to conduct the election. No, you know. Yes, they may not be alive to conduct the election. Example 2. Election officials and materials arrive late at various polling stations on election day. Literally, everybody is up in arms. And the Electoral Commission's offices are saturated with irate callers demanding that voting be extended for various durations of time. Somebody say 1 hour. This person will say 1.5 hours. So on and so forth. That is completely unnecessary. Why? Because automatic extension of the voting time is built into our election law. What does the law say? The law says that if at the time that the polling is supposed to end, there are voters in the queue, all of them should be allowed to vote before the station officially closes, no matter how long it takes. See, that is why in practice we say that when 5 o'clock comes, the security person go and stand at the end of the queue. Which means if you are standing behind the police person or whoever, it means you were not there at 5 o'clock. And you will not be taken care of. See, every presiding officer knows the law. And presiding officers need nobody's permission to extend the voting time. The presiding officer won't call me because I don't know that the election in Bumpurugu Yuyo, what time it started. If I'm in Accra, I don't know what time the election started in Enyimum. So we built into the law, all right, that at 5 o'clock, if there are people in the queue, if it will take you up to 10 o'clock to take care of them, you do so. So automatic extension is built into the law. And there is no need, to be shouting, fighting, and doing all kinds of things because the election materials have arrived late. Example 3. Party agents refuse to sign the polling station result forms. And sometimes they threaten to beat you because they are macho people. So they threaten to beat you if you try to convince them to sign. See, whether they do so on their own volition or under instruction from somebody, refusing to sign the pink sheet, as we call it in Ghana, does not automatically invalidate the election result. Even some candidates believe that if the agent doesn't sign, it means the results are invalid. And we are even sometimes told that the candidates tell the party, if I lose very badly, don't sign it. Thinking that thereby it will be invalidated. No. Refusing to sign the pink sheet does not automatically invalidate the election result. What does the law say? The law says if you are refusing to sign, you must give reason in writing at the polling station why you will not sign it. And then the Electoral Commission will later look into the reason that you have given. If you have not written any such thing, you can ignore it. So it is important to remember that being an agent at a polling station is brain work. It's not brawn. You don't go and ask them that, are you mature, can you fight? We are not going to fight at the polling station. It's brain work. The person must understand what is going on so that it can raise some of these things. But a lot of tension, a lot of conflict is built. In fact, I have said many times that given the importance of the pink sheet, and we'll see later on, I'll talk about this, I think nobody is too big to serve his or her party as an agent on election day. Nobody. Unfortunately, I've seen at some elections some very big people, serving as agents. Don't go and recruit non-entities to go and do the work at the polling station. It's brain work. All right. Madam, now I'll turn on to campaigning. Yes. So these are 3 examples of people who acting violently simply because they don't understand the electoral process sufficiently. All right. Now, campaigning is as a source of, ideally, political campaigning offers candidates the opportunity to indicate what they would do to benefit the people of a constituency or the entire country, as the case may be, if they are voted into power. That is what campaigning is about. Tell the people what you will do for them when you come into power. But in doing so, they must regard other candidates as legitimate aspirants to the positions that they seek to occupy. Basically, that is what clean campaigning is all about. Madam, against the this backdrop, I wish to single out two things in particular about campaign, namely unclean campaigning and the abuse of incumbency. A campaign is unclean if, instead of focusing on issues of relevance to the people, it is littered with insults, hate speech, and unfounded allegations. It arouses ethnic or racial sentiment, or is characterized by a lack of respect for other candidates seeking the same office. And let me quickly give you an example. As an election observer in Zimbabwe, I was once shocked by how the late President Mugabe described his main opponent and the reaction of the audience at a big rally in Harare. He said the opponent had a big head, but the head was filled with wool and not brain matter. And he kept saying wool, wool, wool to the wild, applause of the audience. Utter disrespect for a person seeking the same position as you. That's an unclean campaign. Yeah. Abuse of incumbency means that the government or its surrogates misuse the power that they have. The abuse takes various forms in the emerging democracies. But let us take particular notice of the following four. 1, the government dominates the state media. And I've been to places where the government monopolized it, not just dominate. 2, political authorities close down media facilities without recourse to law. It's happening in Nigeria as at now. 3, state resources, like vehicles, are used in support of the campaigns of the ruling party. And 4, elaborate ceremonies are organized to relaunch old projects to create the impression that they are new. All these are forms of the abuse of incumbency. It's your money, my money, that they are using to do that. All right. Generally, campaigning towards a general election may arouse disagreement with other political parties and even the Electoral Commission. But unclean campaigning and the abuse of incumbency are matters that can promptly attract violent reaction. Now there's another one that we call claim to exclusive domain. The claim may be based on ethnicity. Oh, this is a Akam party. This is an Ewe party. this is Igbo party, this is Hausa party. The claim to exclusive domain may be based on ethnicity or religion. This is a Muslim party, this is a Christian party. Or local dignitaries like chiefs who are affiliated to specific political parties. And they use that to create a no-go area for other political parties. Should another political party dare to go to such a place to campaign, it is likely to be met with violence because it is considered to be an invasion of territory. You can't come here. Sometimes the chief says, I don't want anybody to contest the incumbent candidate. I'm satisfied with him, so I don't want anybody to contest. So this claim to exclusive domain is also a source of trouble. The use of thugs. Political parties and candidates often use thugs to intimidate, harass, and disrupt meetings and rallies of other parties, and to inflict violence on their opponents, and even ordinary citizens known or perceived to belong to other political parties. This is a worrying matter in many emerging democracies. Madam, the next one that I want to briefly mention as a source is vote buying. Vote buying. In simple terms, vote buying is a two-way street involving buyers and sellers of votes. Politicians are the buyers, and they can buy votes from voters or election officials. And the reason why politicians buy votes is straightforward, for purposes of winning elections. What is more difficult to unravel are the reasons why voters sell their votes. Poverty and illiteracy are often cited as factors. I don't discount that. In a recent report on the subject of vote buying, some voters said that politicians make a lot of money when they win. So it is right to take some of that money if they want you to vote for them. Others went a bit further and said that while they make lots of money, in between elections, they don't do anything that benefits the people. So election time is a sort of tax time. Madam Chair, vote buying is an age-old phenomenon. With your indulgence, I will tell a small story that indicates my personal concern about vote buying. Some years back, the Catholic Laity Council of Nigeria invited me to speak to them about elections at their annual meeting in Benin City. They left the title and content of my speech entirely to me, with a rider that they hope to gather from my speech information that will be helpful in educating their members about the importance of elections in a democracy. I decided to title my speech, "Why Votes Must Count." Incidentally, that speech predated the formation of the Let My Vote Count movement in Ghana. So you can understand why I would be happy about the formation of the movement. Unfortunately, the movement appears to be visibly missing in action these days. Anyway, in the context of the rider, I covered a lot of ground about elections in that speech. First, I said that if illiterate and poor people fully appreciate the value of the vote, they would view their votes as a weapon for alleviating their poverty and not as a commodity for sale to the highest bidder. And I think they sell partly because we have failed to educate them properly to understand and appreciate the value of the vote. It's a birthright that you are selling. It's not a piece of yam. Secondly, because I was speaking to a religious audience, I said, quote, "At the risk of sounding sacrilegious, for purposes of democracy, votes are godly, and men of God must stand up for votes to count." Votes are critically important. Anyway, Madam, like the reason why politicians buy votes, I think the reason why some election officials take money or some other form of inducement to help candidates to win elections is also straightforward. They do not have ethical competence. Ethical competence is not quite the same as professional competence. Professional competence is usually measured in terms of how knowledgeable people are in their professions. But very knowledgeable accountants, for example, may be better positioned to steal money from the public purse and cover their footsteps than persons who know little about accountancy. The same is true of election officials. Ethical competence is a predisposition not to do what one knows to be wrong in one's line of work. It's a predisposition not to do what one knows to be wrong in one's line of work. Yes, mistakes do occur in election work, but an honest mistake can easily be detected and corrected. Not so deliberate wrongdoing. By their training, every election official knows that it is absolutely wrong to doctor election results. So such behavior must be severely punished because it undermines the sovereignty of the people, which underpins our democratic constitutions. Certain forms of vote buying can easily be dealt with. For example, the practice whereby voters present pictures of their marked ballots to candidates as evidence for payment can easily be stopped by prohibiting a voter from taking any device that can be used to take a picture into the polling booth. And Nigeria has incorporated that into their law already. They're going to have elections on the 25th. You cannot take your cell phone into the polling booth to go and take a picture of your vote and then go and show it as evidence to the candidate thereafter and collect money. That used to be done in the past. Now let me turn briefly to the media. My friends, our friends. In examining the media as a source of electoral conflict, I stick with the traditional distinction between public and private media. And I place under private media, under public media, state media, and social media. And under private media, partisan and independent media. I think one fact about the media is clear. It is that the ever-increasing expansion of media spaces in radio, television, and print and social media offers increased opportunities for good or bad. Madam Chair, state media is in principle the people's media. So it can be compelled by law to offer certain services in the public interest. However, as already noted, in many countries, the state media is dominated, if not monopolized, by the government of the day, to the annoyance of the opposition. I classify social media as public media because practically everybody on their own can get onto the social media platform. Social media offers new avenues for citizens to engage in the electoral process. For example, in Nigeria, an association founded by a young lady has been using social media to galvanize the youth to vote. Social media also offers new avenues for the Electoral Commission and political parties and candidates to share information with citizens and reach out to voters. However, if it is not used responsibly, partisan media are affiliated with particular political parties. The reason for their existence is to push the interests of the respective parties. And there should be no qualms about that role. Trouble comes when the partisan media, indeed any media for that matter, descend into the gutter and spew out incendiary statements, misinformation, fake news, and all manner of debt. Unfortunately, these days, social media is becoming widely used in this way. I classify as independent any media that is not affiliated with any political party. There may not be many these days, but the independent media have great potential as a public educator and a guardian of democracy. However, for this potential to be realized, an independent media establishment must try to do three basic things insofar as elections are concerned. One, they must give equitable access to parties and candidates and report their activities accurately. Two, they must provide information that make people knowledgeable about the electoral process. 3, they must provide information that enables the electorate to scrutinize the candidates and make informed choices. The last source that I want to quickly call attention to relates to impunity. In every country, the electoral law specifies what election offenses are. The problem is the inability or unwillingness to enforce the law. In this regard, the police, who are supposed to secure a peaceful environment for elections, may be a source of conflict if they turn a blind eye to electoral violence in particular. If violence is not seen to be punished, it breeds more violence. Now, so there are many sources of conflict. Conflict in elections will come from a lot of sources. Madam Chair, I want to say a word or two about conflict prevention. The sources of conflict in elections are so varied. They are so varied and rich that from time to time an electoral conflict will arise. We cannot avoid electoral conflict altogether. It will arise from time to time, no matter what we do. When we speak of conflict prevention in election discord, what we are really saying is that there are certain things that can be done towards minimizing the incidence of conflict or dispute in elections. And I wish to indicate some of these things in respect of electoral commissions and political parties, starting with the Electoral Commission. The first thing is building consensus with other stakeholders. I think it is very important for an electoral commission to consult with political parties to build consensus on its electoral processes with a view to achieving common ownership of the electoral system. This is best achieved through dialogue in a forum like Ghana's Interparty Advisory Committee, APAC, which dates back to 1994. I find it instructive that since its formation, many African countries have created similar forums, albeit under different names. Madam, I was invited to Uganda when they were inaugurating the IPAC, the equivalent of IPAC. Election security is another area where consultation and consensus building is very important. Every security situation tends to have its own dynamics. For this reason, it is prudent for the Data Commission to collaborate with the security agencies and security experts to closely analyze the security situation in the country, identify the areas and groups that are prone to violence, and decide on the appropriate ways to deal with them. Aside from building consensus with other stakeholders, there are things that an electoral commission can do in-house to minimize conflict. In this connection, I want to indicate 5 things that I think an electoral commission should do. 1, to minimize suspicion and distrust, it should set up a transparent framework for carrying out its tasks. For the most part, election work is public work. It is to be done in public view. In any case, there are not many secret compartments in election administration. There aren't. 2, it is important to build integrity into the electoral system itself. System integrity is different from personal integrity. Obviously, if all persons who do one form or other of election work were honest persons, there would be much fewer problems about elections than we usually have. The fact is that an electoral commission cannot vouch for the integrity of all its officials, let alone the thousands of persons it employs to do election work on a temporary basis. And this is what makes inbuilt system integrity so important. System integrity means that audit trails or sequences of checks are incorporated into the electoral processes such that mistakes and other lapses in performance can be traced to the points where they occurred. Correlatively, system integrity makes it possible for the Electoral Commission itself or an independent person to verify whether electoral outcomes are correct or not. An audit firm was once engaged to audit election results in Lesotho. And when it examined the available materials, it said that a proper audit could not be done because the results could not be traced to specific sources. Yes, that was the Deloitte and Touche. Yes. After examining the material, I said, no, a proper audit cannot be done. That shows you that there was no inbuilt system integrity. 3, an election commission should train its officials well in their various tasks. You see, election is such a risky business that even petty mistakes can irritate candidates to act in diverse ways. Petty mistakes. It is important to train the officials very well so that they don't make petty mistakes. Yeah. Somebody writes, for example, under our system, you write 1, 2, 3, 123. You're supposed to put it in words. My God. Some officials cannot do that. We've seen it, yes. What is written in words is different from number that is put there. Create unnecessary problems because the people were not trained properly. 4, an electoral commission must institute a vigorous program of voter and electoral education. Most of the time we talk about voter education, but I'm saying voter and electoral education. Voter education is what everybody needs to participate in the process. Electoral education is targeted to the various groups. If you are a police man or woman, and you are on election duty. What are your responsibilities and so on? Very important. And journalists and all manner of people require electoral education, which is additional to the voter education that everybody needs. Sometimes you need to target people. Number 5, on occasion, an electoral commission may have to be flexible in applying electoral rules and regulations, but it should never bend them. Sometimes it is important for an electoral commission to be flexible in applying the rules and regulations, but it should never bend the rules and regulations. Exercising flexibility means lawfully loosening the grips of the rules and regulations for the benefit of all, such as extending the period of registration of voters or the nomination of candidates to afford greater opportunity to eligible persons who have genuine difficulties in participating in such activities to do so. I'll give you one example. When Sierra Leone was preparing to hold its first election after the Civil War, a major problem was how to get the Revolutionary United Front, RUF, the rebel army that still occupied parts of the country, to take part in the election. After protracted negotiations, they agreed to take part in the election as a political party. So they call themselves the RUF party. They turned the movement into a party. All the other political parties submitted their lists of candidates ahead of the close of nomination. When the Electoral Commission contacted the leadership of the RUF, they said they needed more time. Yes. As their leader was then in jail, it was common knowledge that they had problems, particularly about settling on a presidential candidate. If the leader had not been in jail, the leader would have been a presidential candidate. The leader was in jail, infighting about who should become presidential candidate. Knowing that the rebel army had the capacity to disrupt the election, particularly in the countryside, the commission decided to accommodate them by extending the nomination period for quite a long period. And in doing so, the commission said that the parties that had already submitted their list could change their candidates during the extension period, if they so wished. You see, you can't do it for the RUF alone. You can't. And some actually did change some of their candidates. This is a correct way of being flexible. Bending the rules or regulations means loosening the grips of the rules and regulations for the benefit of a particular stakeholder, political party, or group, to the exclusion of others who may be in a similar situation. Bending rules and regulations is outright unfair and discriminatory, and may even be unlawful. And the matters that I've spoken about, I think, are consistent with the core principles that underpin the work of an electoral commission. Madam, as for the political parties, if they were to abide by the constitutions which they have voluntarily given to themselves, that would surely minimize internal party conflicts. The Electoral Commission didn't write the constitution for them. They wrote their own constitutions. If they were to abide by the law that they have given unto themselves, they would surely minimize internal. Again, if the political parties were to do clean campaigning, reflecting real policy choices for the people, and devoid of no-go areas, personality attacks, abusive language, ethnic or religious incitement, there will be much less pollution of the electoral environment. But perhaps one can only hope that they will do these things. However, Madam Chair, with specific reference to a dispute over an election result, that is, who won or lost an election, there is one thing that political parties can do to assist an electoral commission or a court to resolve the dispute as quickly as possible. In this connection, I have time and again made two statements in particular. One is that elections are won or lost at the polling station. The other is that in resolving an election dispute, the name of the game is evidence. I made these statements long time ago. And initially, they were derided by some journalists and politicians as trying to shift responsibility. All of them are saying elections are won at the polling station, won or lost at the polling station, and the name of the game is evident. Told them a long time ago. Yes, a long time ago. Long time ago. Now, they have all come to the realization that authentic, duly executed polling station result forms. Let me repeat that. Authentic, duly executed polling station result forms. What we call pink sheets, thanks to the late Obichibi Lamte. He's the one who gave the name pink sheets, to those things. So that if you were able to save some from the last one, you cannot use them for this one. That year, they were printed in pink color. So he called them pink sheets, and they become the name. It's all right. It's a shortened name. Once we all know what it is. The polling station results form, called the pink sheets. They are the basic documents for the reconstruction of election results, either by the Electoral Commission itself or by a court. There can be no other such essential documents. They can't. So we say in election discourse that authentic polling station result forms don't lie. Authentic pink sheets don't lie. That is the only way you can reconstruct an election result. In any case, I think that it is a fatal mistake to demand a reconstruction of election results without recourse to authentic polling station results. It may simply amount to playing into several unknown hands. Madam Chair, I wish to indicate in summary fashion 2 other factors that may help to lessen tension in the electoral environment in general. 1, attempts towards creating a level playing field for political parties include public funding or support for political parties, restrictions on campaign finance, and the prohibition of the abuse of incumbency. Two, instituting stern penalties as deterrents for infractions of electoral laws, particularly in respect of bribery and corruption, violence, and the use of thugs, intimidation, and preventing qualified persons from voting. Madam Chair, let me now turn briefly to conflict resolution. What I talked about so far, the ways that we may be able to lessen conflict. Now, how may we resolve conflicts? I think it is important to bear in mind that electoral conflicts come in different kinds and take different forms. There are certain kinds, for example, an internal party dispute, and certain forms, for example, violent instruction. These forms, an electoral commission can do practically nothing. So there are certain forms and certain kinds that the Electoral Commission can do very little about. It is also important to note that it is not only the Electoral Commission that tries to resolve electoral disputes. Where they exist, external bodies like peace commissions or councils, religious organizations, business organizations, labor organizations, and important chiefs have sometimes been involved in resolving electoral conflict. In fact, in Nigeria, it is the Peace Council, as we call it, that got the political party to sign onto a peace accord. It wasn't the Electoral Commission. It was the Peace Council that brokered that exercise. And now everybody in Nigeria is telling the political parties, hey, you signed the accord. Behave, in accordance with the accord. So it's not only the Electoral Commission that should be. That when you come to the Electoral Commission itself, how they resolve disputes may be subsumed under 2 main ways: direct intervention and the use of power. Direct intervention. Direct intervention involves meeting with the aggrieved party or parties, closely examining the issues involved, and giving appropriate explanations. And I can tell you that many disputes have been resolved in this way. But when direct intervention fails, an electoral commission is left with no choice but to use its power in law to resolve the conflict. In using its power to settle a dispute, an electoral commission should make absolutely sure that there is no law that prohibits it from doing what it contemplates to do. If no, then it can go ahead and do it. Yes, if there is no law preventing the commission from doing what it contemplates to do, and it will resolve some important dispute, it should go ahead and do it. Under this practice, an electoral commission can, for example, move a polling station or constituency center from one place to another in case of controversy over the original siting, or use pink sheets to review disputed, ungazetted election results. You've done it before. There were occasions when, now the border between Greater Accra and the Eastern region. A particular place, go there, is claimed by the Eastern region, is claimed by, Greater Accra. You know how we resolved it? We set 2 polling stations, one here, one here. If you think you belong to Greater Accra, come and register here and vote. If you think you belong to the other place, go and register there and vote. We did not infringe any law in doing that. And we had the power to do that. So we used power to resolve it. Otherwise, there would have been fights where we place these things. Anyway, so let a commission be sure that there is no law that prevents you from doing it. If there is no law and the act will resolve some important conflict, go ahead and do it. As I said, no matter what we do, disputes will arise. Conflict will arise. When they do, they cannot be resolved through street fights and media war. They can't. Electoral conflicts are not resolvable by street fights and media wars. If all else fails, the proper place is the court. Is the proper place. The court is the last stop in electoral conflict resolution. So, Madam, with your permission, I'll tell briefly to the courts and then end. Some countries have set up specialized courts to deal with election disputes. In others, like Ghana, election disputes are handled by the ordinary courts. Whatever the case may be, an election dispute is a matter of the moment and needs to be settled fairly and without much delay. Obviously, the requirement to be fair becomes problematic where the judiciary is under the sway of the government. Usually, the courts have broad powers in election cases, including to declare a winner, to punish an election offender, and to order a rerun of an election in whole or in part. In Nigeria, the other day, a court has declared the governorship election, I think it's in Ogun State, nullified. It will have to be redone. In fact, in recent times, resort to the courts to resolve political and electoral disputes has been increasing in the emerging democracies. This has given currency to the concept of the judicialization of elections and politics generally. This is a worrying phenomenon. But examples of judicialization can be found in Ghana, and as at now, I was told the other day that the Independent National Electoral Commission of Nigeria has been joined in close to 70 election-related court cases. Joined. And it's going to have elections very soon, and there will be more and so on. But I want to cite an example from faraway Guyana in South America for its illustrative value, both in politics and elections. In doing so, I have cut off some related ancillary legal issues to make the narration simple and straightforward. Madam Chair, Guyana is a Commonwealth country nearly the size of Ghana. It has a population of less than 1 million and a parliament of 65 members. In December 2018, I'm giving you the time span so that you can see what judicialization does. In December 2018, the opposition tabled a motion of no confidence against the government. The result was 33 for and 32 against the motion. The government lawyers said the government had not fallen because the majority required to pass the motion was 34. The opposition took the matter to the High Court, which ruled that the motion was properly passed, meaning that the government had fallen. The government appealed the case to the Court of Appeal, which by a majority decision said that the majority required to pass the motion of no confidence was 34. Not satisfied, the opposition took the matter to the Caribbean Court of Justice, Guyana's highest court. The court finally ruled that the motion of no confidence was properly passed, so an election had to be held to form a new government. After a considerable delay, general elections were held on 2nd March 2020. Look at the time span. 2018, the motion, the election, 2nd March 2020. But the final results could not be given until 2nd August 2020. That is 5 months after election day. I was there, so I know. I was there. Why so? Why? 5 months. The simple answer is that the tabulation of votes in the region which had the largest number of votes was mired in intense controversy. That region, Region 4, where the capital is, had the largest number of votes. All the regions had done. And it is that the court may not pay sufficient attention to the electoral justice principle of the primacy of the voter and therefore the sanctity of the vote. In my view, the principle indicates that a duly cast vote is like, if you like, a sacred cow, not to be cast away lightly. A duly cast vote, because of the primacy of the voter and therefore the sanctity of the vote, you cannot just cast it away. If that interpretation is correct, it is just not right for a court to cancel any duly cast votes in an election and then declare a winner if there is a mathematical chance that the cancelled votes would make a difference to the result. You know, the constitutional courts do it. There are so-called constitutional courts, particularly in the French countries. So, cancel votes, as for here, they are tainted. Cancel them and then go ahead and declare. I don't think that. Perhaps the second takeaway is that given the increasing judicialization of elections and politics generally, the judicial phenomenon known as packing the bench may well be a form of vote buying. Madam, I wish to conclude by making a simple and straightforward plea. And the plea is this. As an electoral commission, as political parties and candidates, and as voters, let us all do what is proper in elections, so that election day does not look like a battlefield. Election day should be a day of joy, because it is the day that we celebrate our equality as a people in selecting our leaders. It should be a happy day. And we shouldn't turn it into a battlefield. So let us all behave properly in relation to elections, and everything will be well. Thank you very much.